Hey, good morning, afternoon, or evening, good people. Wherever you are, wherever you happen to be, and however we're together. Thanks for being here. I'm Dave, and this is Dave's Head. So, what's in my head? Well, the shutdown's finally over. After House Leader finally fulfilled his duty and sworn a duly elected representative, the long stalled discharge petition for the release of the Epstein files, excuse me, gained enough votes, passed both chambers, and was signed into law. Yet, despite this quote unquote monumental step forward, trust in the Trump administration to release the full, unaltered documents is incredibly, and I'll dare say minusculely, if that's a real word, low. Now, the public's question remains, will the truth actually come out, or will critical details be hidden? And I even heard today that before recording this episode that the DOJ said that they were going to exclude quote unquote critical parts, or what's the word, government top secret, whatever they call. I'm forgetting the phrase right now that they call it. National security. There you go. National security interests related information, which doesn't make sense to me because a child predator, pedophiles circle of fuckery, for a lack of a better word, is not of national security interest unless it includes people in the current government and you want to deem it national security interests. To me, this should be very simple. I mean, extremely simple. You have all the documents. You go through and redact the name of every single victim. Every single one. You start with the first one, that's victim one. Everywhere in the document that person's mentioned or referred to, that will be relabeled or redacted and replaced with victim one. You do that with the second victim in the series of documents, all the way up to victim X. Those are the only people you protect. And so if you have a document that says victim one all the way up to victim 100, which hopefully that's not the number of victims there are, then you have a document that has victim 1 to victim 100. But every single other name of every single other person who committed these vile, disgusting acts against these underage girls and boys, maybe even too, should not be protected. I don't care if they're a sitting president or a former president or the head of a Fortune 10 company, the richest person on the planet, the poorest person on the planet. I don't care who it is. If they participated in this, their name should be made public. Period. But I understand, protect every victim. This is not what it's about. And the Trump administration or Republican Party has even indicated that it's really about protecting the victims through their actions, not through words, through their actions. Now, courts have previously rejected requests by Trump's Justice Department this year to unseal transcripts of proceedings before grand juries that investigated Epstein and his former associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, I always mispronounce her first name. Now, she's serving 20-year sentence for helping Epstein sexually abuse underage girls. According to Reuters, though, only 20% of Americans, 1 in 5, including just 44% of Republicans, so you can imagine Democrats, independents, where how low that is, approve how Trump has handled the Epstein case. Shocking. I can't find people, I can find very rare people who actually are okay with how this has all been handled. Makes no sense, but there are people out there. 70% of the poll respondents, including 87% Democrats, 60% Republicans, said they believe that the government is hiding information about Epstein's clients. Duh. I, for one, count me in that 87% or 60% or 70% total. I think what's going to happen and there's no indication to believe that it's going to be anything different, is you're going to see some subset of documents that will mysteriously not be redacted the same as other subset of documents. And they're going to point the finger at Democrat people, whether officials, government workers, whoever, and somehow they will not reveal the names of Republican or quote-unquote MAGA offenders. We all know that's coming. We all expect it. And this is not a Democrat or Republican thing, but it's being made that because of the way this administration is operating. And it's sad, extremely sad. Because this is about the abuse, maybe even torture, sexual abuse, rape, trafficking of underage women. It's not about your little boys club or your little MAGA cult. It's not about that. But unfortunately, that's what it's about. That's what it's become about. That's what it is. And so, will we ever get the real truth? Because what should happen is exactly what I started by saying. Redact the names of the victims. Stop there. Period. Everything else, stop there. And get the real truth out. Because that's all that matters. That's really what matters in all this. The victims is all that matters. And it's frustrating, it's disgusting that this is the world and government we exist in. And ladies and gentlemen, we are not even a year into this administration yet. Think about it. We are not even a year, a full calendar year, 365 and 1/4 days. We're not even a full calendar year into this administration yet. And all of this crap has happened. Morals out the window. Standards out the window. Law and order. That was a bullshit talking point to begin with. They never cared about law and order. They cared about your vote. They cared about pointing the finger at someone else to blame for your lot in life. To borrow a quote from one of my favorite movies. That's what they care about. They care about you victimizing yourself and pointing the finger at somebody who they also don't like so they can get your vote. And now we're here. Thank you. And believe it or not, we have 3 more years left of this. Are you ready for it? This is the season finale of Dave's Head. Season 6, wrapping up this episode. By the time we come back, we will be a full year into this administration. And we will have turned over a calendar year, 2026. What's interesting to me, somewhat scary, more interesting than scary, is the notion that things typically slow down in the government, slow down professionally, everywhere, for everybody, as the weather turns colder, the snowstorms happen. In the era of social media, the era of instant news, that's not looking as likely with this administration. The all caps 2:30 a.m. rants about nothing logical will continue because that's social media, 24/7, 365, never ends, never stops. There's rumors that medically, physically, there are things going on with Trump that may shorten his lifespan. Just yesterday, former Vice President Dick Cheney, who, like him, don't like him, I wasn't a fan, but I didn't hate the guy. His funeral was yesterday. Both the president and vice president weren't invited. And that's fine. I wouldn't want them there either. They make it about them. What's difficult to look forward to is 6 months from now, a year from now, when we're on the precipice of the middle of this administration, when we're looking at midterms and the fallout from potentially that. When we look at these things and where the state of our government, our democratic republic, will be. That's kind of the scary thing. Because law and order, again, is not something this administration is about. Defying judges. Supreme Court basically in their pocket. The amount of damage that can be done between now and midterms, and this is assuming a lot. This is assuming that, as predicted, Democrats will take back the House, which means you'll have a divided government, which means in order to get things passed from the president's agenda, it'll take a lot working with Democrats, etc., etc. There's even outside chance they could take back the House and the Senate, which would just throw our government in chaos, I think. Because anything gets passed will not get signed. It probably wouldn't be veto majority in the Senate to overrule. So it'd just be one vicious cycle of passing things that never actually become law. But even if we did have that situation, we got to get there first. And we can't even decide anymore what's actually a professional occupation. If you did not hear the news recently, things like nursing, engineering, architecture are no longer professional occupations, which have financial repercussions when you talk about student loans and education financing. But theology, I believe, is professional. The study of religion and Christianity somehow is a professional occupation. These are the things that, and so much more potentially, are still yet to come in Project 2025. If you bother, just read it. Look at the highlights, do a clip notes, I don't care. But if you go through and look at Project 2025, this is all part of 2025, Project 2025, which Trump claimed he had no idea about. But all these policies he's enacting, implementing, executive ordering, the big ugly or big beautiful bill, quote unquote, Project 2025. And so there's a lot of people, including farmers, I've talked about them on this podcast before, who have buyer's remorse with regard to voting for Trump. As Kamala would so emphatically say. Try to tell you. Just saying. Before I get to the last thing in my head, Dave's Head Podcast is now part of the Alive Podcast Network, home of Black Voices, where community, culture, and creatives live. Dave's Head Podcast adds to the catalog of over 70 titles available in the Alive Podcast Network and app for both iOS and Android, and now on Roku, Fire TV, and so much more. Check out Dave's Head Podcast and many others in the Alive Podcast app, the home of Black Voices. The last thing that's on my mind is leadership and ownership. Two words that start differently but end the same, conveniently. Now, I hold multiple leadership roles personally, professionally, organizations I'm a part of, nonprofits that I chair, etc., etc. Leadership has and can be difficult, emotionally taxing. And I've prided myself and even have a reputation professionally of not, quote unquote, rattling easily. It's a double-edged sword because while my demeanor is calm, organized, solution-centered, I don't want to dwell on, what's wrong. I'm going to come up with a solution and let's fix it and move on. This is personally, professionally, and so on. But in order to have that mindset, there's a bit of emotion that has to be removed from it. Removed from what you do, how you think, how you operate, how you lead. Because it's not about the problem, it's about the solution. It's about the steps that need to be taken, who needs to take them, and how you get them to begin taking those steps. How do you command attention, following? And so, while leadership and ownership can be difficult, it's about, to me, playing the long game. Seeing the distant goal while walking this windy, pothole-ridden, frustrating, and sometimes even battling against the elements. And the elements could be a person, a thing, infrastructure, finances, all these things, it isn't always simple. The reward of leadership, the reward of ownership, is in witnessing that vision begin to unfold, seeing that light at the end of the tunnel, and actually getting to that light, getting and seeing that vision become fruition. All these things are the rewards of owning something, leading something. And so leadership and ownership have been heavy on me and it's always this time of the year. Without getting specifics, because I actually sign NDAs and other things, there are roles and responsibilities as a leader, as an owner of people, process, results, that comes with doing evaluations, being critical but honest. And it's always this time of year. It seems like whether it's an organization, nonprofit, those type of things are always centered around end of year as opposed to maybe end of fiscal year, which is different. And so this time of year, you get the dreary times, you get daylight savings time rolling back, you get the urge to want to be on a beach somewhere. You don't want to be doing evaluations of people that are under your charge. And so I've had to do that multiple organizations recently. And there's frustration with that because these are people you consider your friends. These are people you consider, your shoulder to shoulder. You go to battle with them. These are people you plan with, to execute with. And so ultimately looking at them as an individual with no face, no name, and saying, what have you done this year? What have you done for this organization? What have you done for this department, this team, this nonprofit, whatever, based on what the goals were? And sometimes it's about having those hard conversations. Sometimes it's about high fives and recognition. And sometimes it's just somewhere in between. But having the honesty being the root of everything you do in this regard as a leader, as an organizer, as an owner, goes a long way for the people who are under your charge, your teams, your organizations, your boards, your committees, all these things. And that's where I pride myself in playing the long game, because you play the long game of honesty and you keep that honesty consistent. The rewards are those who are in your charge will walk shoulder to shoulder with you, side by side with you, and you'll also march towards that same vision, that same goal, that light in the tunnel, all those things. One organization in particular that I lead is moving forward towards a major milestone, something I've been working towards and pushing towards for a while now. And it's going to benefit the entire body. It's going to benefit the entire organization. So the added benefit is that it's going to free up some of my time to wedding plan. How about that? It's the notion that many hands make light work. And while I am Capricorn to a T, blood vessels to skin, and I will pick up a pen and do it on my own, I will sit in front of a computer and do it on my own, I will do whatever it takes to do it on my own if I have to, I understand and appreciate the saying, many hands make light work. It's something I talk about and preach about all the time, but it's not something I always do. But with this particular organization, to see this path that's been walked with very few hands, potentially getting more hands, and hands that benefit in great ways, that's a beautiful thing. And so when it comes to leadership and owning something, that's all you want, is to see growth. Because there's a saying, the ultimate leader is someone who produces leaders. I'll say that again. The ultimate leader is someone who produces leaders. It's okay to lead. It's okay to get a team or a committee or a board to follow you. But it's also great to have a tree, right? You think about Andy Reid and his coaching tree, if you're into football. To have a leader tree. To say, hey, this person came from Dave, and that person came from that person. And so on and so on, repeat. And then you look and you have a tree with all these branches. But knowing that you or the top of that branch is a beautiful thing. It's a testament to your leadership abilities and the results that you produce. So ownership and leadership are amazing things if you do them right. But make sure that the root of what you do is honesty. That's what's in my head. Childhood obesity continues to rise, yet misconceptions about its cause persist, whether medically or just even in the general population who has no idea about the causes, how to lower it, etc., etc. According to the CDC, approximately 1 in 5 U.S. children and adolescents have obesity. Now, obesity affects some groups more than others, including adolescents, Hispanic, non-Hispanic Black children, and children in families with lower income. According to the WHO, in case you don't know who the WHO is, the World Health Organization, in 2024, 35 million children under the age of 5 were overweight. 35 million children. And over 390 children and adolescents aged 5 to 19 were overweight in 2022, including 160 million who were living with obesity. Now, my guest for this episode, Dr. Evan P. Nadler, he's a pediatric obesity treatment pioneer. Author and educator, brings unmatched clarity to one of the most misunderstood health challenges in America. He's author of a book, The Skinny on Childhood Obesity, How to Help Your Child and Curb the Epidemic. Dr. Evans' life work focuses on a complex biology between weight regulation and the importance of early evidence-based interventions. Keyword, evidence-based. We love facts around here. So, Dr. Evan, welcome to Dave's Head. How's it going?
Hey, good, Dave. Thanks for having me. And I apologize for that mouthful of an introduction you had to try to get through, because it's a lot. But
it gets better because I asked you to do the same thing. So what I normally do with my guests is I give a little brief intro, which I just did, but I also like my guests to introduce themselves in their own words. So if you could, take a moment, tell the people who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Sure. So for the folks out there, I'm a pediatric surgeon by training and still practice regular old pediatric general surgery on the daily. But about 20 years ago, I had sort of an epiphany moment where I saw that, actually it was more than 20 years ago, 25 years ago. That's how old I am, can't even remember. Just saw a need. I just saw there were so many children out there with obesity that weren't really getting any care at all, because no one really wanted to talk about it, no one wanted to address it, and obviously sensitive subject, so people pretty much avoided dealing with it. And then I started doing bariatric surgery or weight loss surgery for in a sort of less medical term for kids. Actually, that's what I started doing 20 years ago, 21 years ago to be exact, and started small, and then it grew rapidly to the point where I was the busiest pediatric bariatric surgeon in the country for about a decade. And I also used to study fat cells in like the laboratory and do all sorts of clinical trials and translational stuff as well. So I like to sort of think of myself as a well-rounded expert on the topic. I'm not just solely about surgery. I'm not solely about diet and exercise. It's not solely about the medications that are out there. I just basically want to give people as much information as I can, and then let those folks do what they want with that information, or at least help them come to maybe a decision about how best they can help themselves, their families, their loved ones, in a judgment-free, safe space kind of way.
Now, it's interesting you say judge-free, because when it comes to obesity, that is one of the areas of bullying that's almost universal.
Yep.
Gender, race, income status, living conditions, location, city, rural, suburbs. What has your experience been around bullying? And that actually wasn't supposed to be my first question, but you triggered me with the end of your statement there. What's been your experience around bullying, with whether it's your patients or just the industry you're in?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not surprising for anyone to hear that obesity, stigma, and bias and bullying, to some degree, are among the most blatant and still accepted forms that are out there, right? Like, and some of it is subconscious, right? Where, you're on you're on Southwest on an airplane, and it's open seating, and you've chosen your seat, and you see someone with obesity walking down the aisle, and in your head you're thinking to yourself, please don't sit next to me. Please don't sit next to me, right? And that's not necessarily bullying, but that is, it's unconscious bias. And don't think that that person who's walking down the aisle doesn't know that everybody's thinking that, right? They know that everybody's like dreading there. So it's a miserable situation for everybody. With bullying specifically, yeah, I mean, obviously I've taken care of lots of kids who are actually homeschooled. Not homeschooled because by choice, but homeschooled by necessity, where the kid was just getting tortured at school and just couldn't go through the daily, experience without, without undue mental stress. And I think the numbers are about 70% of people who have obesity suffer from mental health issues related to their weight, and it goes bi-directional. Like if you have obesity, you're more likely to have mental health issues, but also if you have mental health issues, you're more likely to have obesity. So it's a huge problem, and it's part of the reason I'm just trying to be out here sort of normalizing the discussion or trying to get people to be a little bit more empathetic about the disease, because it's affecting. So the numbers you gave were worldwide, but in the U.S., there are about 150 million adults with obesity and about 15 million children with obesity. If you add in overweight, the numbers are over 200 in the adult world, 200 million, and in the pediatric world, it's 23 million or something like that. So huge numbers of people. And, again, we just need to talk about it a bit more, talk about it in a compassionate way a bit more, and then come up with like real solutions for people.
Now, on a solution side, a lot of people think that it's just this lifestyle choice. They eat a bunch of steaks and fatty foods and fast food, this and all that stuff, which is not necessarily true. So can you talk about understanding obesity as a disease rather than simply just a lifestyle choice?
Sure. And don't get me wrong when I say this, when I start going through this, because lifestyle choices are definitely important, right? That it is important for all of us, even if we're at a normal weight. If we exercise the recommended amount, we're going to be metabolically healthier than if we don't. And there are data showing that sitting on a desk, sedentary lifestyle, contributes to, lost years of life. So all of us can do better when it comes to diet and exercise. But the myth that obesity is due to a lack of exercise or eating crappy food is just that. It's a myth. It's not the cause. I mean, even if you just think about your own friend group or social circles or work group, there's always somebody out there who can eat anything they want and they don't gain a pound. And then there's the other person who's in your group that pretty much eats like a bird, but are struggling with their weight issues. So it's clearly not just calories in, calories out, and that's been sort of, again, debunked by scientists. And they're just a bunch of different drivers. Genetics, something called epigenetics, which is how your genes are modified by the environment, and which doesn't change your DNA, but changes how your DNA work, basically. And then there are all kinds of things like the ultraprocessed foods, and even the air we breathe has chemicals that can disrupt your metabolic health. The forever chemicals that are in plastic bottles. The field's evolving to understand those things better, but the one piece of the puzzle that's pretty well understood is that it's not just diet and exercise. Diet and exercise work much better as prevention efforts. They don't work at all as treatment efforts. So again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't all eat better, and I'm not saying that some of the stuff that's out there now about reducing ultra-processed foods, generally, I'm not saying those things aren't worth pursuing. I'm just saying we have to also deal with the folks who already have obesity because they need treatment. And that, coupled with some better understanding of the causes and some prevention efforts, that's the only way we're going to move forward globally in reducing the burden of disease.
Now, something I haven't heard before is that air contributes to our obesity or lack thereof. Um, can you talk about that a little bit? Because it's something I've never even thought about. You know,
Yeah.
my fiance has tons of plants in his house, which, you know, in theory should contribute to better air. But is that not the case? Is it more than just having plants in the house?
Oh, well, I mean, first of all, again, the science isn't really there yet. But people may be familiar with redlining and where cities were sort of divided amongst places that were desirable to live in the city and places that were less desirable. And the folks that were on the wrong side of that red line were exposed to, you know, factory smoke or other pollutants that no one wanted to live near, but I don't think they understood that those pollutants might have health effects beyond sort of lung or asthma or stuff like that. And again, we don't necessarily have concrete science about all that, but the data are beginning to emerge that some of those chemicals that are in the air, again, can disrupt your endocrine system, your metabolic system, and, you know, really like, you know, whether they increase your risk of obesity directly or indirectly, don't really know quite yet, but it may be through those epigenetic changes that I was just talking about, might be how it works, but again, it's a thing. It's like, yeah, it's all these things that are out there that we're just now trying to really get in the deep weeds with of how they negatively impact our health.
Now, I know you talked about depression and how that relates to obesity and how they are interchangeable as far as causing the other. But talk about the difference between childhood obesity biologically and adult onset. And the reason I'm bringing it up and not saying that children don't have stress and depression, because they absolutely do, but people generally stereotype adults as being depressed
Sure.
and not necessarily children.
Yeah.
But talk about the difference between biologically childhood obesity and adult onset obesity.
No, and actually it goes back to what you were saying about sort of diet and exercise. Like when I talk about childhood obesity, I sometimes tell people, like, listen, I'm seeing 9-year-olds with type 2 diabetes from their weight. Those kids haven't been on the earth long enough for diet and exercise to make a difference. And even if they have been on the earth 9 years, only maybe 4 or 5 of those years were they even in control of their own eating, right? They were just, you know, they couldn't get their own food. Their parents had to feed them. And so no parent, like, intentionally feeds their child into the disease of obesity. So similarly, when you're talking about mental health stuff, well, children can definitely have the same anxiety and depression that adults do, 100%. And it definitely increases their risk of obesity and vice versa. If they have obesity, those issues can definitely compound. But what makes childhood obesity sort of uniquely different, and almost, in my mind, a subset of the overall disease, like a separate subset, is that one, again, the genetic and epigenetic and in utero drivers of disease are much stronger. So, and we haven't talked about the in utero part yet, but yeah, like if you're a mom and you get diabetes during your pregnancy, that increases your child's risk of having diabetes or obesity once they're born. But what's the real difference is that the diseases related to obesity, the comorbidities we call them, they progress faster in kids. So if you're a kid with insulin resistance, the time it takes you to go from insulin resistance to frank diabetes is actually shorter than it is in adults. And the same thing goes for liver disease. So the diseases progress faster, but then there are also a couple other diseases like orthopedic diseases where your legs bow, where that only happens if you're a kid because your growth plates are open and thus the weight on your legs as you grow causes your legs to bow out. And that requires surgery in some cases, many cases. So it's really you know, the whole myth of baby fat and kids growing out of it and all that stuff. That's another like big one for me that I try to dispel, because if you have obesity at any age, it's really bad for you, and not dealing with it is not the right answer.
Yeah, we actually, and I don't say we as in me, I'm saying society, we kind of joke, oh, that's a big baby, or that's a big toddler, because, he can bench press, whatever, or he's going to be a football player, he's going to be a lineman, but it's really a child pre-obese is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, I took care of kids who were on their high school football teams and linemen. And I had a couple coaches who were not happy because I got their, 400-pound lineman down to 280. And the kid obviously was happy and wanted to get healthier. And, I told him, I said, listen, defensive ends at 280, they make as much money as left tackles. So I'm not changing your earning potential. I'm just changing your position. Joking, obviously, but that was sort of the point, was that like healthier at 280 is better than unhealthy at 400. But the whole idea of, so if you're a toddler, if you have obesity as a toddler, you have about an 80% chance of being an adult with obesity. If you have obesity as a teenager, you have about a 95% chance of being an adult with obesity if the disease is left untreated. So that, again, that whole idea that people grow out of it, it doesn't even hold true for like 2 and 3-year-olds. They don't grow out of it. So again, it's sort of why I'm out here. And, people listening to your podcast are probably not teenagers, but they're people who have maybe 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds, or have teenagers. And so hopefully enlightening them to really take it more seriously maybe, or deal with it head on is sort of my goal today.
Yeah, or I'd even say some new parents who might be listening or watching to this podcast, some great information to prevent your child, passing that generational, if there exists, that generational obesity.
Right. So the intergenerational transmission of obesity is like my favorite topic. And I may have just,
that was coming up.
I was about to say I may have just preempted your next question, so sorry about that. But you said the word generation, and I got all excited. And so even if there are people listening who haven't had kids yet, my advice for them is get your own metabolic health in shape before you have your kids, because it'll help your kid's overall risk of diabetes or obesity. And it'll help you, obviously, as a parent, or, going through, or if you're the mom, getting through pregnancy, being healthier. And then actually that kid's born into a family where, metabolic health is prioritized, and whether you achieve health by diet and exercise or by medication or by surgery, I don't really care. I want whatever works for you is great, but just don't ignore the problem, because then you have your own health and then you have your kids' health, and you've sort of potentially jeopardized both.
So just to take a step back for a second, and just in case there are some in the audience who don't know the difference, can you just briefly explain the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes?
Sure. So, so in the old days, actually, they used to be called, type 1 was juvenile onset diabetes, and type 2 was adult onset diabetes, because the pathogenesis, the mechanisms behind the disease show themselves at those different age groups, and the type 1 is really almost like an autoimmune disease, where the cells of your pancreas that make insulin are destroyed by your own body, so you can't make insulin, and that's why most people with type 1 are on insulin or insulin pumps or something like that. Whereas type 2 is really about insulin resistance, meaning your pancreas works, but your body just doesn't respond to insulin normally, and it's due to your weight in most cases. And why it's no longer called adult-onset diabetes is because it's happening sooner and younger in kids. And so that nomenclature had to go away. And the best treatment for type 2 diabetes is actually weight loss. If the type 2 diabetes is related to weight loss, which most times it is. Whereas in type 1, that's not going to help you. That's, it's not good to have obesity in type 1 because now there are cases where there's a mix of both type 1 and type 2. But type 2 is the one that is basically the numbers are just going up and up and up, and really the ones that are sort of causing America's healthcare crisis or healthcare expenditure crisis or chronic health crisis or whatever you want to call it.
Gotcha. So quick story real quick. You mentioned football players, and this sparked in my head. So I played semi-pro ball for 7 years, 6 years, whatever it was. And I played with a guy who played defensive tackle. His nickname was House because he was about 400 and something pounds. And so we've stayed connected after we both thankfully retired. But he's lost a good, I want to say almost 200 pounds, probably a little less than 200 pounds. Obviously, the intent is to get healthy, not carry that weight as a almost 50-year-old man. But that was an example of, I actually heard over the course of the 7 years I played semi-pro, make sure you get him some food before the game. You want him as heavy as possible, stuff to run, all this. We don't think about the effects of the body post playing that football game.
Yeah.
Waking up the next day with all this weight, sore already because we're just football players. You're going to be sore already, but now you're carrying all this weight and you're sore.
Yep. When I was when I was first starting out in this field, I was at a hospital in New York City, and there were a couple pro players who people who, if they're football fans, would know their names, who came in for weight loss surgery after their careers ended because they knew that they were unhealthy, but they were doing it because that was their career, and they made a lot of money playing in the NFL. But after whatever, 10-year career, 12-year career, or whatever it was, they left the game and realized that it's not good to be carrying around all this extra weight. It served a purpose, during their livelihood for a short period of time, but yeah, no, it's like, it also, that sort of goes to another myth that people think about, which is that you can't have obesity and be active. Like you can, obviously these guys were burning a ton of calories. They were just also taking in a ton of calories. But even if they hadn't, well, in their case, they might have lost a lot of weight if they weren't taking in all the calories. But there are people who, it's not just an energy equation. So the body adapts and changes its metabolic rate when you lose weight. So anybody who's trying to lose weight with diet and exercise has experienced a plateau because the body starts fighting back. And so that's why diet and exercise alone doesn't treat obesity, because if you have, like in your friend's case, if you have 200 pounds to lose, really hard to lose that with diet and exercise alone. Possible, because we've all seen it on The Biggest Loser, but what the Netflix documentary that came out afterwards, but also those of us who were in the field knew, is that most of those people gained their weight back after they left the show, and a lot of them gained way more than they had when they were on the show to begin with. So it's not simple. It's not a simple problem. It's a chronic, complex medical problem, disease.
And talking about plateauing and really this concept of the body defending its weight, can you talk about that with children especially, but just in the examples we just gave with adults?
Yeah, and again, it's somewhat complicated, so people don't really understand exactly how it all works. But there's a part of your brain called the hypothalamus, which regulates your hunger and your feeling of fullness, or satiety is what we call it. And basically, you get a weight set point in your hypothalamus. It's like a thermostat almost. And that's generally established when your brain's developing as a baby in utero, in your mom's belly. So first trimester in general. And then there are things outside, well, when you're in the uterus, there are things that can change your weight set point. And then there are things outside when you're born that we think change the weight set point, which is how we think some of the ultra-processed foods might work in terms of increasing obesity risk. But yeah, there were these studies in the 2000s which were really clear about what happens with your metabolic rate as you lose weight, but also as you gain weight. And that's why I took away the word great, because the ones about gaining weight were actually slightly, questionable in terms of the ethics, let's just say. But they intentionally got people to gain weight to see what happened to them. And what happened is their metabolic rate sped up, and they actually also defended their weight, meaning when they stopped the study, their weight came back down to where it had been before the study. I'm not sure intentionally getting people to gain weight could get through ethics committee in today's day and age, but it did back then, and it was helpful because we did learn about what the body does in response. But now it seems like a lot of the weight gain, the response to weight gain is no longer increasing your metabolic rate. Now it's and that's why we think the ultra-processed foods might be part of it, is because now people who gain weight, actually their metabolism can slow as they gain weight, which makes it like a vicious cycle of weight gain that can't be broken.
Yeah, and it's probably why I have this, talk about the hypothalamus, it's probably why I can't get below 187 and I don't go above 201. It's like, for a while I just couldn't peak over 200, which is fine. I didn't want to be over 200. But I would get to like 198, 199, and it would just stop.
Yep.
No matter what I did, eat more, work out more, it just stopped. It would come down to 195, 193, whatever. That's kind of my baseline. But also couldn't get below 187.
Yeah. No, and people who work out all the time will know that if they stop working out all the time, their weight will drift back up, because that's just where their body wants to be. And like you just said for your personal example, it won't drift up forever, indefinitely. It'll find the top range of where it wants you to be, and then it'll regulate. But when you have obesity, all those sort of regulatory mechanisms get all messed up, so they don't work the same way. So there was a study back in the day that showed, which is like, again, sort of a cruel and unusual punishment, but like the bigger you were, the higher weight you were, the harder it was. The bigger the delta in your calorie burn versus calorie intake had to be in order to get you to lose weight. So like, I didn't explain that really well. The bigger you were, the harder it was to lose weight, basically, is what the study showed, which is, again, sort of unfair, right? Because they're already struggling, and then the body makes it so that they struggle more.
Makes sense. So last couple of questions in the Q&A segment. So let's talk about what parents can do. And obviously childhood obesity, and you talked about earlier how, a child doesn't control what they eat. They don't control a lot of the things unless you get bad dynamics in the house.
Yeah.
So if a parent's worried about either their child possibly sliding towards obesity or being obese and how to rectify that, talk about what they can do, whether it's first steps, whether it's treatments or medications.
Yeah.
What path should they go down?
Right. So the first thing to do is like anything else, sort of identify the issue, and then talk about it with your primary care doctor or provider. And obviously a lot of these conversations are difficult to have, right, with your kids. But, at least my opinion is you just got to address it. You got to tackle it head on, because if you don't, there's not likely to be any great outcome. But so, it is hard to find a provider who is willing to deal with weight in children. And that's in part because they don't really get enough education about it, and so they don't feel comfortable about doing it. And then in part because, again, it's, just a difficult topic. But start there. And then there are simple things you can do, like in terms of getting the household sort of in a better shape, quote unquote shape. And I guess I should mention that dealing with children with weight issues is always a family affair. So you can't have mom and dad have their own stash of Coke in the cupboard, but the kid isn't allowed to have it. You just can't do that. If mom and dad need a Coke, they need to do it out of the house at work or whatever. And even there, I've seen many families, and this is always the hardest for the families to understand, where, everybody in the house except for one person has normal weight. And the one person who doesn't have normal weight eats the same and works out the same as everybody else. And, the old days, we'd be like, oh, well, that kid must be sneaking Twinkies at school, or, stopping at the corner store on the way back home or something like that. But that's actually not what happens. It's actually just the genetics of it. And if you ask these families, okay, well, does obesity run on either side of the family? Like, oh yeah, it runs on both sides, or runs on one side. It just skipped me, but my sister or brother has a weight issue. And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, your one kid who has a weight issue just has the same genes as your brother or sister that predispose them. So, again, it's not don't blame yourself, don't blame the kid. It's just biology, and go try to find some help. So if you can't find a provider who can help you, then that's tough, and you have to do some searching on your own. But that's one of the reasons that I actually started a pediatric telemedicine weight management practice, because I wanted to give access to care to people who couldn't get it. And obviously telemedicine is a lot easier than driving to somebody's, brick and mortar office or whatever, hospital, to get seen. But it's going to require, lots of people doing the same thing that I'm doing, or lots of people learning how to take care of kids. And then there's the bariatric surgery programs, which again are mostly limited to academic health centers in big cities. And that's the same for the pediatric weight management programs too, for the most part. Rural areas don't often have access. And even in the cities, so I was in DC when I stopped doing bariatric surgery, even our medical weight management practice had hundreds of patients on a waiting list to come in and be seen, because we just didn't have enough providers who could do it. It's tough, but I would recommend families start with their primary care providers, and then hopefully they can get referrals if they need them. And if they can't, then hit me up on the internet and I'll help you.
Gotcha. So one thing I like about my podcast is through my guest segments, I probably burn a ton of calories just holding follow-up questions in my head as my guests speak. So I actually have two. I have two follow-up questions. So you mentioned Twinkies, and what that took me to, one, I'm hungry. I haven't eaten today. I had some tea, and that's about it. That's kind of normal habit. I don't eat a lot in the morning. But you mentioned Twinkies, and I think there was a study 20-some years ago that essentially said Twinkies are probably the worst combination of everything that a person can eat. And so my question around that is, if you had to put a label or name a food or a food type, we'll go food type to make it more generic, that people absolutely should stay away from. They're probably the worst guilty pleasures in the world, but people love to eat these things. What would you say?
Well, that's a loaded question. So,
hot dogs is another one, by the
Yeah.
way. Hot dogs, they say, is another one.
yeah, so there's a whole science behind how the food industry made things, not only so that they were sweet and salty so that you craved them, but the Pringles can, the noise that when you pop open a Pringles can, that sound has been perfected to make it pleasurable to your ears. And the textures of things like Cheetos or Cheese Puffs, I guess more than Cheetos, Cheese Puffs, because they're crunchy on the outside, so that gives you a textural sensation that you like, but then it basically melts away into nothingness once you have it in your mouth, and so your body doesn't actually recognize it as, getting you full or anything like that. So there are a lot of...
I did mention I was hungry, right?
So I'm giving you a lot of options for the worst thing that anybody could possibly put in their body, but I try to make it more less black and white and more baby steps or gray, which is, so sugar sweetened beverages are probably, sugar in general is probably the number one bad actor, let's say. And usually it's sugar in drinks because you don't even notice it. If you go to like Jamba Juice and get a protein shake, you might be drinking like 70 grams of sugar and you don't even know it because you think you're having something healthy because it's got some fruit in it, and it's marketed well. So I just try to tell people, like, look at your own day-to-day habits and try to pick something easy. So if it's just getting rid of Coke and going to water, that's usually the first step that I tell everybody, because that's generally a lot easier than like wiping out all sugar out of your diet or avoiding all processed foods or never having a bag of chips. So I try to go with baby steps and then build on those baby steps once they're successful. And, again, if you need caffeine, have a unsweetened iced tea or have, iced coffee without sugar. I just try to come up with reasonable substitutes that people can actually do. Because if you give people, like, something that's impossible, a task that's impossible, and they fail, then they're just like, nah, I can't do this. I'm not going to try because I just can't. I can't give up my Cinnabon or whatever, guilty pleasure anybody has. So yeah, I don't want to call out one food. I'll call out sugar.
Gotcha. Yeah, just mention all the things that would make me hungry right now. That's
Yeah, but you're gonna go have a salad, right? You're gonna go have like a.
I actually literally am going to go have a salad. So I'm actually in the middle of a 31-day alcohol fast, and so I was going to ask too about alcohol and the impacts of alcohol and obesity.
Yeah.
It's something. So I've been doing a lot of traveling the last 3-4 months, and a lot of road food, airport food, hotel, bar food, that type of stuff, which always, usually typically comes with a drink. And so I decided to cut back on the alcohol just because it's been 3-4 months of either vacationing or traveling where I've just consumed a lot.
Yep.
I already noticed fat loss, already more energy.
Yep.
But to obesity, and obviously, hopefully, not childhood obesity, but to obesity in general, how do you see alcohol?
Yeah.
Is it something similar to sugary drinks where you're just consuming alcohol, you don't really notice it?
100%. So, like, first of all, alcohol is basically a modified sugar. Like, the molecule itself is a modified sugar. And most people who drink alcohol drink it with a mixer. Not everybody, but, and if that mixer is Coke or juice, that's more sugar and more calories. So yeah, alcohol is basically empty calories, just like sugar is empty calories. So it all is bad for you. There are different alcohols that have fewer calories than others, and there are
Tequila.
Yeah, tequila is one of them. And if you drink, and vodka is another. And if you drink those, on the rocks, then you're limiting your, the other calories that are coming in. And, people need a drink to relax, whatever, that's fine. So, or, you drink with club soda as your mixer. Again, doesn't add any calories. But the biggest thing about alcohol really, and it was interesting to me anyway, because when I was at Children's in D.C. for many of the years, we'd go to the Middle East, and we had some relationships over there, and so I'd learn about obesity in the Middle East, which is in the Gulf countries is a big problem, but they don't actually have the same degree as liver disease related to obesity as we do in the U.S., which is in part probably genetics, but it may also be because they don't drink alcohol over there. So yeah, alcohol's not good for you, other than maybe, help you relax a little bit. And the data actually that came out that actually said that even like a drink a day or something, there was some data recently that just basically said any alcohol consumption increases your cancer risk or something like that, which I think made a lot of people sad, including me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just ignored that. I just decided to ignore that piece of data.
Poured yourself a drink.
Exactly. I just went and got myself a nice reposado tequila on the rocks.
Nice. Okay. All right. So last of my impromptu, my follow-up questions, and I'll get to my actual last question in the Q&A segment. So, and this answer to this could be absolutely no. I've not seen any correlation. But do you see any correlation between, if you think about daddy's little girls and mama's boys? So the dad enables the daughter, or the mother enables the son. As far as bad eating habits or things that lead to obesity, do you see any of that correlation? Because that dynamically, daddy's little girl gets whatever she wants from daddy, and mama's boy, whatever the son wants. So do you see any of that correlation?
That's interesting. I never really looked at it. No, I'm just sort of thinking in the back of my head to try to think about it. And certainly, as I said before, everybody has to be on the same page when it comes to weight management in the family. So if that's going on, it's not helpful. I would say as a dad and a male that, dads are always wrong. So I would say that the moms are always right, and it's only daddy's little girls who are being corrupted by their parents.
Okay.
No, I'm obviously just kidding. I
was going to say that's a whole other episode you got to come back for.
I just like any other married man, you're always wrong. But just kidding. Just kidding, honey. If you're listening, don't listen to Dave's head.
Gotcha. Yeah, this is great because I'm engaged now. This is great. She listens to every episode.
Exactly. No, I don't know. I think, again, I would say that certainly there were lots of families where there was an enabler. I can't necessarily remember a gender difference or sex difference between who the enabler was or how it correlated to the kid. But, it's why, and sometimes actually, I definitely had families where it was grandma who was the enabler. Grandma lived in the house, and the parents were trying to keep the kid from certain behaviors, and grandma was sort of like the babysitter when the parents were at work or whatever, when the kid came home from school, and grandma would just give the kid whatever the kid wanted. So I think there are definitely some family dynamics that play a role.
Okay. Yeah, grandma, listen, they make up for times that they didn't have the great relationships with their children, and they just give the grandchildren anything they want. Anything.
Exactly.
Candy from their pocket, pennies from the purse, all that stuff.
Except for the pennies dead. No more pennies.
Well, yeah, no more pennies. I'm thinking back to my childhood. Now we got to do nickels or dimes, which is costing grandparents more. See?
Yep.
Look at that.
Inflation.
All right. So, last question. The Skinny on Childhood Obesity, How to Help Your Child and Curb the Epidemic. Talk about that book and what you want people to learn or get from it to use.
So first of all, it's not published yet, so don't go looking for it anywhere. It is, and the name could change, but that's how it's listed now and how I'm pushing it. Actually, hopefully in January it's going to go to publishers, and hopefully a publisher sees the need, understands the goal, and takes it on. So it'll probably be a year, if not more, before it actually hits shelves, at which point I will be asking Dave if I can come back on his show and talk about it again. So stay tuned for that episode. But the message really is sort of like what we were talking about today. No shame, no blame, just facts and what you can do about it. And hopefully, not only will it appeal to parents of kids who are struggling with their weight, but maybe even people who struggle with their weight their whole lives and never really knew why, as a 10-year-old, they had such a tough time keeping their weight under control, or why they were hungry all the time. And I hope also medical people buy it and read it to help educate them so that they can help treat more families with compassion and understanding. It's really about just trying to get the message out there that it's a disease. It's a disease that comes from a bunch of different pathways, and it's a disease that should be treated as soon as it's recognized and not waiting until some arbitrary age cutoff or until someone already has, a medical problem related to their weight. Like, as soon as you have concerns, it really should be addressed, and that's the main message. And again, in a evidence-based, hopefully compassionate, hopefully non-judgmental way. I mean, that's what I'm trying to achieve.
Gotcha. And we'll get you back anyway to talk about this dynamic of husbands always being wrong.
No, I'm definitely not touching on that ever again.
Gotcha. All right, so that's the end of the Q&A segment. Now we move to this segment that's my favorite of my guests, called First Thoughts. But First Thoughts is brought to you by the Alive Podcast Network, the home of Black voices, where community, culture, and creatives lives. Dave's Head Podcast is one of 70 titles available in the catalog in the Alive Podcast Network, the app for both iOS and Android, and also Roku TV, Fire TV, and all the other things we're part of. Check out Dave's Head Podcast and many others on the Alive Podcast app, the home of Black voices. Now, Dr. Evan, in case you're unfamiliar, the way First Thoughts works is I offer you a word or a phrase to get your thoughts on something. Obviously, you're not privy to this because you would ruin the whole premise of First Thoughts. So, are you ready for some First Thoughts?
I am, although I have to make sure I've taken my proper medication so I don't say anything too off color or out of bounds. But no, I think I'm good.
Okay. Well, this is an explicit podcast anyway, so it doesn't matter.
I'm just worried. I'm just worried about having to go back and deal with the fact that I called out all wives. I'm a little worried about what I did there.
You slip me a check. I'll edit that out or something. But first thought is weight loss, quote unquote, quick fixes. What's your first thought?
Snake oil. There are no quick fixes to weight loss. It's just not. People have made a ton of money pushing whatever their favorite diet or supplement or online program or digital, phone-based service, whatever. It's all basically BS or snake oil.
Okay. Yeah. No, I agree. There's so much. I mean, once you attach yourself, especially online, to one advertisement, you get just pushed every single thing in that whole topic. I think everybody has probably seen this at some point. You go to Amazon, you look for, I don't know, a basket, and now all of a sudden all your advertisements are baskets, and it's just, until you get something, they'll just keep firing them at you.
And unfortunately, and this is again a topic for some other podcast, some other time, but like the average the U.S. in general has sort of lost trust in their medical professionals, right? Like, and maybe that's true in part because of all the information that's available on the internet. And it's probably good that people self-advocate more than they used to. But, like, I'm trying to be out here just being an evidence-based, science-based kind of guy, and I'm fighting against all these internet influencers who are just telling you, 30-day juice cleanse or whatever they're talking about, or just try my supplement. It's got NAD and B12, and you'll lose 100 pounds if you take it. And so I'm constantly up against that kind of stuff, and it's just hard to win. I think we need more docs actually to get on social media and start fighting back with just the data that we have.
Gotcha. No, I agree. I'm a big facts-based, intelligent conversation, dialogue type of person. So I definitely think that everything's polluted at this point between, looking at facts versus fiction versus opinion versus snake oil stuff, as you said.
Yep.
Next first thought, and it's something that I struggle with in a sense of understanding. And before I get to the first thought, I'm an athlete, so my measurements are a little different than someone who's not an athlete, just putting it in that context. So BMI, what's your first thought?
Screening test. So it is not it's not something that should be used to say someone has a weight issue or not, or obesity or not. It's a screening test, meaning, if you have a high BMI, we need to look a little further and make sure that your high BMI means something. And so certainly people with big muscle mass will have higher BMIs. And that's actually healthy, right? If your percent body fat is low, but your BMI is high because you're a weightlifter, then you're healthy, and we don't need to necessarily think about your BMI. It also turns out that BMI isn't appropriate for lots of different ethnic and racial groups. You know, it was initially sort of put together from a bunch of white middle-aged guys. And so if you're Southeast Asian, for instance, India, the BMI that you start to have diabetes from is way lower than it is here in the US. So again, it's a screening tool. It's not perfect. It's actually not even good in many cases, and not necessarily appropriate for, you know, again, people of different ethnicities and races. But it's the best we have for now. And if you just use it as a screening tool and remember that it's not the be-all and end-all of weight or weight management, then it's much more useful.
Gotcha. And last first thought, and I'll preface by saying think vegetarian, pescatarian, those types of things. So alternative dieting lifestyles. What's your first thought?
Some good, some bad. So the sort of vegan advocates who say everybody, if the whole world just went vegan, we wouldn't have obesity. That's, again, an oversimplification of the problem, not to mention it's completely impractical for the whole world to go vegan, not to also mention that there are data that show that certain vegan diets, the patients don't get enough protein, and it's actually bad for them. On the flip side, you know, Atkins diet, where all you're eating is steak and mayonnaise, basically, that also is not a great long-term diet for you. So when you look at all the sort of data of all the different diets over the years, it really comes down to the balanced Mediterranean diet being the healthiest. And, you know, fish, vegetables, fruit, you know, an occasional meat, and everything in moderation. So it doesn't really require rocket science or a fad diet. It just, you know, it's more sort of all the things we learned when we were kids about what was healthy and what wasn't. Although some of those change over time, which is part of the reason the medical community doesn't have the trust it once did. Like eggs were terrible, and now eggs are okay again. So it's like, you know, that's the issue with science, is it changes over time. But the point is that, like, the quick fixes and the fad diets and all that stuff, or the alternative diets, or whatever you want to call them, you know, in general, they're more bluster than meat. That's not the saying. Whatever. They're just not usually what they're cracked up to be.
Gotcha. And for somebody like me who eats just about everything, when I hear occasional steak, I hear I can never eat meat ever again. It's just the way it works in my head. But
there are certain things, like, you know, we turns out, like, you know, tuna was like the hottest food to eat for a long time. You know, everybody wanted an ahi tuna at their fancy restaurant, you know, sushi grade, whatever. But tuna is a bottom dweller of the ocean and has lots of things in it that actually aren't that great. So now the recommendation is like once a month is about all that you should eat tuna. And that's, you know, I don't know, I can't remember who came up with that recommendation, but somebody looked at it scientifically and came up with it. So really, you know, again, it's like, I think everybody's different. Every individual is different. You can figure out yourself what works for you. Like, maybe Dave can eat a steak every week because he also lifts 3 times a week, and he also does aerobic stuff 4 times a week because he's in hotels, and, you know, he uses the hotel gym every day he's there. So he does that to combat the bar food and the drink that comes with it that night, and that's how he finds his balance. You know, but that's going to be different than someone who never works out. So again, I think it's trying to find your individual, you know, homeostasis or whatever. Because and then you hear people say, like, yeah, I could live forever if I just never drank alcohol and was on a completely vegan diet, but I wouldn't want to. You know what I mean? Like, you have to enjoy your life a little bit, right? So you have to have some things that are pleasurable. It's not just about how long you can live or how healthy you can be. It's about the quality of your life as well. So, again, I try not to be too much like you can never do X or Y or Z. I just try to say, use your judgment and try to make it make sense for you.
No, I get it. And I would say last year I was probably the working out in the hotel gyms and working out every single day. This year has been a struggle trying to work back that way. Fortunately, I am sort of blessed with high metabolism, so I can still burn it off, and I'm always active, so that helps as well.
Yep.
But so last season I started a new feature called TL First Thoughts, which provides my guests an opportunity to throw a first thought back at me to see what my first thought is. So, Dr. Nadler, if you had a first thought for me, what would it be?
Miami Heat.
Oh. So we talked. It's funny because we talked about this before we started
That's
recording.
why I
So
said
I go
it.
back
That's why I
to
said it.
the Knicks rivalries. Always the Bulls sometimes, but the Knicks rivalry games were the big ones. Even the Pacers once in a while back in the Reggie Miller, Rick Smiths, what do they call it? The whatchamacallit brothers. What are they called? I can't remember their names right now. But one of the things I alluded to before we started recording was that's the NBA I used to love. The grinded out defensive battles, physical. You couldn't shoot logo threes and win games. It just feels less authentic in many ways, which is why I don't watch really until the playoffs. I mean, there's too many games. I can't watch them all. Two, I really just don't even pay attention until the playoffs. It's just, okay, who are the teams making the playoffs? Is my team in there? No, okay, I'll find one to cheer for. Same thing with hockey. I don't really watch hockey either until the playoffs. Baseball, I'm a little more engaged just because I like baseball. Football, obviously, football is my sport. But yeah, I miss the old days of, fights and elbows and, big centers and just, slower game. It just felt more authentic, back in the day. Minus the malice and the palace brawl and all that stuff, but,
Yeah, we're our generation. I'm probably slightly older than you, but our generation is similar, and the old school '80s basketball is missed, definitely.
Yeah.
But
Well, I remember, when Patrick Ewing or Rick Smith shot a three, it was like, oh my God, they shot a three. Now it's like you got 7-footers shooting threes every game. It's just, it's a different world now.
Well, and Victor Wembanyama, I mean, that guy, if he stays healthy, he's going to be like. Yeah. I don't see how he doesn't become the best player who ever lived because he's 7'5" or 7'6" and can do almost anything on a basketball court. Yeah. So that's a crazy athletic freak.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Dr. Nadler, as I do with my guests, I'm going to give you the opportunity. If there's anything you want to wrap up with or talk about or promote, feel free to do so now.
Yeah, well, thank you. And again, thanks for having me on. And, I'm not really necessarily trying to promote anything other than, people being more aware of a disease that I think is important and trying to make a better world for kids. I guess if people want to learn more, they should go to my website, which is www.obesityexplained.com. Or better yet, I guess, for my YouTube channel, which is also at Obesity Explained, and subscribe because, in theory, the more subscribers I have, the more likely a publisher is going to pick up my book and more likely my message will get to the general public. But I'm not really trying to sell anything here other than, and it sounds corny, whatever, that I'm just trying to sell good vibes or like education or advocacy or any of that stuff. But it's the truth. I just want people to understand that obesity is a disease, not a lifestyle choice, and there's something you can do about it. And, be kind to others. Stop blaming, shaming, pointing fingers. Just be a good human, which is sort of, again, like that's not a great message that anyone's going to like pick up and go viral with, but that's all I'm out here trying to achieve.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, there's nothing wrong with not having a promotional or fiduciary agenda coming on this podcast or any promotion.
Yeah, exactly.
But I will say it's a great message. So you may or may not know this is the season finale of Dave's Head. It's also the 100th episode.
Oh, I did not
So
know.
I think it's an important but great message for the season finale and 100th episode. So
Cool.
I do thank you for stepping to Dave's Head and coming on and talking about an important topic, an important disease that we should know more about and talk more about. As I've done this entire season, I'll end it by saying, may every today be the best day of your life, Dr. Nadler. Thank you for stepping in Dave's Head.
Oh, cool. My pleasure, and happy to come back anytime.
My absolute favorite segment of our podcast is My Grin, which stands for Great Reason to Be in Love with Now. It's pretty hard to really associate this episode with any other grin besides the fact that this is episode 100. 100 times I've come before you, whether on audio only early in this podcast journey or switching to YouTube or Spotify video, now the live podcast network as well. I've come before you 100 times. That's amazing. That's a major milestone for Dave's Head Podcast. We do 2 episodes a month. We take off August, December, and January. And somehow, through 6 seasons, we've gotten to 100 episodes with you right there along the way. When this show began, it was rooted in a mission to share facts and help people move far beyond fear and misinformation, disinformation, all that during the COVID era. We started with an episode with my financial planner. We got to number 100 talking about obesity. And in between, the goal was always the same, to put out factual, real important information for you to consume and to do something to better your lives with. And I'm so thankful to reach 100 episodes. I'm so hopeful that you found benefit in not only the first episode, but this last 100th episode as well, because that means a lot to me. Over time, this platform evolved for truth-telling, emotional honesty, learning from an array of incredible guests, all stepping in to Dave's Head. Researching for this episode, I was curious what the demographics had evolved to over the course of these past 6 seasons. And multiple platforms that I'm on, again, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, a live podcast network, Roku, all these different venues or vehicles, I should say, that we have. What are the demographics? So just curious, want to share with you. 52.4% female, 37.8% male, 9.9% other or unknown. Our age demographics, 48 to 59, 29.8%, 35 to 44 is 25.7%. Basically, those are the top 2. Top 3 really is 28 to 34, 24.4%. And so if you look at the demographics, it's really 28 to 59 is where the bucket is. But, and the other 20% is under 28 or over 60, if that makes sense. So basically a quarter within that 28 to 59 range, 3/4 inside of there, and a quarter less than 28 and greater than 60. Countries, U.S., Israel, Canada, Brazil, Italy, and the Philippines. UE, or United Kingdom, or Britain, or whatever they're called now. I can't even remember anymore. But also, they're up there as well. And interesting enough, 61.7% watch on their mobile phones, mobile devices. Makes sense for today's era we're in. 22% on TV, which I appreciate. I want to grow that a little bit. Next season, we got some surprises, maybe, in store. And 16.3% on the computer. That actually surprised me more than anything, because having people watching the computer, maybe they're watching doing work, which I appreciate either way, as long as you're not dereliction of your responsibilities. But 16.3% in front of the computer was extremely high for me. I figured maybe 1 or 2% might watch on the computer, but I appreciate that, because that means while you're working, I'm entertaining you. If you're like me, you have dual monitors, and so I'll watch something on one monitor and get to work on the other and do all types of stuff, listen to music, all types of stuff. So I definitely appreciate that. So, again, to every listener, every supporter, every person who played even one episode, thank you. as I begin to take my customary break, which we know we don't do episodes in December, my birthday month. We don't do episodes in January because we're just starting off the new year. And so we'll be back in February. I wanted to, and I will, reflect on how to elevate season 7 even further to make it as excellent as it can be. But before we go and wrap up season 6, I wanted to look back on 100 episodes, and I wanted to name my personal top 5 guests. That's my grin. My great reason to be in love with now is the fact that, number one, we're at 100. But the fact that I can look back on 100 episodes and find 5 guests that I think not only did I appreciate, but I believe, based on everything, viewership, commentary, feedback, that you also appreciated. And so I'll start with number 5. Number 5 has to take a look back at number 1. The very first episode of season 1, the very first episode of this podcast, I had on my financial planner to really talk about how to get through COVID financially. And not just get through it, but get beyond it in the days to follow. And so Ty McGilberry appeared not once but twice on this podcast. Season 1, episode 1, and season 2, episode 4. He was the first, I believe. He might have been the first or second. I think he was the second. Multiple guest appearance guest. I really just made that very complicated. He was the second person, I believe, to come on multiple times. And so I thank Ty not only for kicking off what would be 100 great episodes in my mind, and hopefully yours too, but sharing something important in a really important time for not only this country, but for this entire world. So Ty McGilberry would be number 5. Number 4, you may remember back in season 4, I had a guest on who told really compelling and honest truths about surviving an abusive relationship. It hit home for me, it hit home for many of you because I saw your comments, I read your emails. And so Eileen Santos came on episode 10 of season 4 and really was very, very open and honest about what she endured and how she had persevered, and that was better living because of it. And so thank you, Eileen, for coming on and just being open and honest, vulnerable with your story. Number 3, I actually appreciate because it was an unexpected great episode. I didn't know what to expect from it. And since then, we've connected on LinkedIn, and I read and share her content, and she reads and gives feedback and likes and comments on my content. So Tiana Sanchez came on 5 episodes after Eileen, season 4, episode 15, and talked about professional development and had a lot of gems. I remember feeling informed, educated, and even motivated about the things that I can do for myself, but also things that you out there could do for yourselves. And I remember a lot of feedback and the positive for that episode and some of the gems that she dropped. And so Tiana Sanchez, who's going on, I believe she does LinkedIn Learning. She's contract with them. I think she did a TED Talk since then as well. And so I would urge you to follow her on LinkedIn if you don't. She provides content multiple times a week, really, really great content. And so again, thank you, Tiana Sanchez, for coming on back in season 4. My number 2 guest is one that has been on the most return guests. He's been on 3 times. Season 3, episode 10, season 3, episode 12, and season 6 this year, earlier, episode 11. And that's Barry Grant Jr. He's the host of All Even Podcasts. Nice dude, great dude. We've actually traveled up there, and I recorded an episode in his studio on his podcast. And we keep missing the connection, but we're actually supposed to get together for dinner at some point. Maybe we'll do it during this off season between seasons. But Barry Grant Jr. has a podcast where he talks a lot about sports, but he also talks about life as well. Puts out great content on his social media, both YouTube and Instagram platforms. And so if you get an opportunity to check out his podcast, All Even Podcasts, hundreds of thousands of subscribers. He is the standard for where I'm trying to get to in this small market, if you will, podcast world we live in. But check out Barry Grant Jr., only 3-time guest that we've had on this podcast, and we'll probably have him on a 4th time as well. Maybe around Super Bowl next year to talk about some sports, maybe the beginning of season 7. But Barry Grant Jr. will be my number 2 guest out of my top 5 for my first 100 episodes. Number 1 is impactful for me. And so the season finale of season 2, I had on a personal dear friend of mine to come on and talk about surviving and his journey with cancer. And so that was season 2, episode 19, and my guest was Chaka Williams. And so not only is this my top episode, top guest, but this was also the most viewed on YouTube, most commented on YouTube and all my platforms because of his personal journey at the time with cancer. And he was very candid, very vulnerable, very truthful about his journey, the things he had gone through, some of his recommendations. And a few weeks later, we were set to go to, I want to say Dominican Republic. I can't remember now, which is weird. But to celebrate his 50th birthday. And so it's an interesting story. We accidentally scheduled the same resort for the same week. Now, granted, I believe him and his wife flew out a day before, and I believe they were there a day before I got there. And we told the story, I think we told the story on the episode. He reached out to me because I do a lot of traveling. Hey, you got any recommendations for places? And I gave him a list, and I didn't really hear back from him for a couple hours, or might have even been a day or two. And either he reached back out or I reached back out, and he just sent me a link and said, hey, I'm going here. And I said, really, what date? And he sent me the dates. I said, dude, I will be there while you're there. I didn't tell him I was going on vacation, just happened to work out that way. But, you know, the most memorable thing for me, obviously, if you may recall, is he would pass away within a year of this episode airing. And so I got to celebrate essentially his last birthday with him and his wife, and really get to spend that intimate time with him. We talked, you know, you're in the Punta Cana, I believe is where we were, and, you know, having those heart-to-heart conversations and not realizing this would be one of the last real deep conversations I would have with Chaka, and also not realizing this would, you know, be, I don't know, the 11th or 10th or 9th time I would see him. You know, I would only have 8 or 9 times remaining to actually see him before he would transition. Because again, you never know when your clock is up. You never know when you finish running your race. And so to be experiencing that and have that experience of spending that time with him and celebrating him and his wife, because they have the same birthday, but to celebrate that with them and that be the last birthday he celebrated before he transitioned is something I'll never forget. But specifically about this episode and why it's number 1. One, it has a very close connection to me. It's my brother who came on to talk about a very, very serious medical situation and cancer that he was going through and was surviving at that point. And just the things that he shared to help others hopefully get through their situations, maybe even prevent. And I think that was one of the biggest messages that he conveyed, was to make sure you do your screenings and your checks. And it wasn't that he didn't. It's just that, you know, the body does what the body wants to do. And getting those checks as early as possible can help you with your survival percentage. You know, catching it early, catching it stage 1 or stage 2, as opposed to catching it 3 or 4. And so those are my top 5 guests for the first 100 episodes of Dave's Ed Podcast. Tommy Gilberry, number 5. Eileen Santos at number 4. Tiana Sanchez at number 3. Barry Grant Jr. at number 2. And my good brother, Chaka Williams, at number 1. I want to thank Dr. Evan P. Nadler, childhood obesity treatment pioneer, for closing out this season, but also closing out our 100th episode with a great topic we need to discuss a lot more, childhood obesity. Check out his website, obesityexplained.com. You can also find him on YouTube at obesityexplained. Again, it's a topic that not only impacts children or your children, not only impacts potentially you, because there's adult obesity as well, but as we talked about, generationally, it can be passed down. And so it's about your health today, it's about your children's health today, but it's about your offspring's offspring tomorrow. So pay attention, do something about it, get active, do your checks, talk to your doctors, all that stuff. Your health is not just about you. It's about what you actually pass down, whether it's through mindset or habits. All of that matters. Lastly, this season, I started leaving you a quote to end every episode. This one, I think, was, to me, about leadership and experience. And you think about 100 episodes and the decisions that you make along the way to grow, to improve, your self-criticism, all the things you look at. And I talked about being a leader and owning things before. I'm a leader of one with this podcast. I own this content, the direction. It's on me to improve it. Professionally, personally, same deal. It's on me to make the decisions, to own things, to make them better, or as I like to say, to choose excellence. And so this quote is by Tony Robbins, and it goes like this. It is in your moments of decision that your destiny is shaped. Making choices, evaluating the pros and cons, doing the due diligence, the research, facts-based research, doing all these things, relying on your own personal experiences, removing biases, keeping it black and white, all those things. And even if it comes down to a coin flip, which, by the way, isn't 50-50, but that's another topic for another episode. All that helps to mold and shape your destiny. Your experience is important. Your education is too. And so combining those two things on a foundation of truth and honesty and facts is what makes a great leader and allows you to own things in the right way. So, for the 100th episode of Dave's Head Podcast, leadership, pioneers, and centesimal. All great reasons to be in love with now. Until 2026, have an amazing and safe, loving holiday season. An amazing, beautiful, relaxing even, new year. And we'll see you next year. Take care.
That's all for this episode of Dave's Head. If you enjoyed this episode, I'm sure you'll love similar content in the Alive Podcast Network app. Plus, you can support this podcast and enjoy ad-free listening to nearly 100 other Black-hosted podcasts. Download the iOS or Android app, become a member, and experience unlimited access to Black-hosted content week after week. Follow, like, and or subscribe to this podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and or X at Dave's Head Pod, and on YouTube at Dave's Head Podcast. For more information and links to all things Dave's Head, check out our website at daveshead.card.co. Episode premiere on the 2nd and 4th Fridays of the month. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, enjoy life because life should be fun. Take care.